Welcome to the Poetry Box Live. I'm Shawn Aveningo-Sanders, and we're so happy that you could join us here today. For those of you who may be tuning in for the first time, my husband Robert and I run an independent press here in Portland, Oregon, known as the Poetry Box. And to help support our authors reach a broader audience, we host the Poetry Box Live on the second Saturday of each month. And for today's show, we have three amazing poets who will be reading from their new books. Today's featured poets include Michael Waterson, joining us from California, P.M. Draper, reading from Florida, and David Gonzalez, who will be joining us from New York. And we have audience members today from all over the place. We've got people that have registered from Oregon, California, New York, Florida, Alaska, Illinois, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Texas, Vermont, Washington, and also from Canada and Ireland. So I'm not sure if they all made it in here, but they did register, and we're happy to have you all here today. I just love how Zoom has made it possible to share poetry across the globe. It's just really great. So let's get started with our first featured reader, Michael Waterson, author of Cosmology of Heaven and Hell. Michael Waterson tells himself he looks good on paper. Born and raised in the Pittsburgh, PA, Waterson got gobsmacked by language at an early age, rapt by the wizardry of Shakespeare and the Celtic spells of Yeats. Growing up Roman Catholic in a place characterized as hell with the lid off, colored his life in ways he's still discovering after 7 decades. Then as a young man, he headed off to party in California and never left. He earned his Bachelor of Arts from San Francisco State University and an MFA from Mills College. His poetry has won awards and appeared in numerous online and print journals throughout. He currently resides in Napa, California, where he is Poet Laureate Emeritus. He is a storyteller and singer-songwriter with a local traditional Irish music band, Kith and Kin, and has had several one-act plays produced around the country. Please welcome Michael Waterson.
Thank you, Shawn. Thank you so much for this opportunity and your amazing support. I owe a debt of gratitude to Kevin Proofer and George Searles for their timely assistance with a manuscript, and a big, big thank you to April Osmond. Without her assistance, this collection surely would not have happened. At the outset, let me say that I often feel ambivalent about poetry, my poetry anyway. The words of the great poet Marianne Moore often come back to me. Regarding poetry, she famously said, "There are things that are important beyond all this fiddle." But in those moments of doubt, I also think of Ezra Pound, who said, "Only emotion endures." And I'm reminded this is who we are. Poetry, the arts, is the part of us that endures. And speaking of fiddle, I grew up watching these guys after school and on Saturday mornings. And looking back, those viewings might help explain some of my dysfunction. Stooges' apotheosis. Devoid of Keaton's martyr's soul and Chaplin's saintly grace, destruction was their holy role and Bedlam sacred space. In overalls or cummerbund, no matter what the trappings, they were divine impostors from the bungled heart of things. A universe where brutal slapstick chaos calls the tune, and laughter is the thunderclap of the gods, applauding ruin. This grew out of a conversation I had with myself at 3 a.m. in the dark. Colloquy with death. I was chatting with death the other day, shooting the breeze in a whatever happened to what's his name conversation, when out of nowhere, he startled me with a confession. Bursting into tears, he wailed he feels worthless, racked by self-loathing. I was taken aback. I didn't think we were close enough for that kind of sharing. Awkward. Ever agile, I played the puffer. You are the tortilla, I said, of the whole enchilada. The arrow shot through love's heart. But I don't think he bought my bonhomie. As my proffered garlands wilted, seized by unease, I broke things off with a wave, a crack at a smile, all the best, etc., and walked briskly away, feeling hollow eyes following me. wondering what in the world to do with this frightening new intimacy. Thank you. In the past, we were forced to use our imagination. Even as a young man, I was forced to use my imagination for entertainment. As a kid, few baseball games were televised. Most were on radio. And my grandfather, whom we all called Pops, was a great baseball fan. This poem grew out of happy memories I have of him. I used some baseball jargon, including the word fungo. Fungo is a type of ground ball fielding practice that the coach uses a special slimmer, lighter bat with, called a fungo bat. Baseball on the radio. Long before desire benched the boy I was and took the field, we escaped baking in our old brick oven those summer nights when Pops ran a cord to the porch window so we could sit listening to katydid shrieks, compete with buzzing ballpark fans peppered by vendors hawking cold beer and peanuts as fireflies signaled heater, deuce. The zenith glowed like the tip of Pop's cigar as the commentator fungoed lapidary stats between plug of chew yarns, green as the outfield. Like the one about Casey Stengel, booed at the plate in Brooklyn, Casey doffed his cap, releasing a bird that flew over the stunned, silent crowd. Or the time he thought it too dark to play and signaled the bullpen with a lantern. Those spells kept us wrapped in the windup, the pitch, the crack of horsehide on ash, the majestic arc pictured in the words of a waking dream. Poetry flying like Casey's dove, timeless as a summer night, on waves of amplitude, out to diamond stars, modulated memories crackling with static fading in and out. Thank you. So for a long while after Elvis Presley died, there were reported sightings of him as a highway worker and a mail carrier and a garbage man. And this myth developed that he was not dead, that he'd faked his death and gone underground. But that got me thinking that maybe Elvis, like Hamlet's father, was condemned to walk the earth as a ghost for punishment in the afterlife. So that led to this poem. As a historical note, the part of Satan in this poem is played by Henny Youngman. Elvis in hell. Even on days he's condemned to shake off dusty death and rise anew to make another roadside cameo before a white line wired trucker highballing Peoria, or a spectral reflection in the window shopping reverie of a Tulsa widow. Even in those moments he is risen off the record, his soul remains imprisoned in a velvet painting in El Paso, a sequined t-shirt in a boardwalk casino, a Nashville plaster coin bank statuette. These haunts, new and old, render no release for a US mail of the old stamp from the net of impersonators, harpies of regret, drawling old songs that scald like bacon grease. Offer no freedom, sweet and redeeming, like in those golden, olden hound dog days on the flatbed stages of State Fair midways, girls in cotton dresses crying and screaming as soulful music erupted from within, gospel grace raining fire down from heaven. No more. The ghost gig's torturous dumb show and Stygian nights flash neon agony, for he is not the hot act down below. The king is dead, no headliner he, in sold out rooms on the infernal strip, just a has-been warm-up for the big marquee, the grinning boss of Mephistopheles, who sets him howling with a quivering lip and a biting quip. Take my dignity, please. So as I mentioned to Shawn earlier, before we started, as we were discussing, we're coming into a dangerous time of year in the West Coast, in California, particularly. At this time of year, winds typically shift from blowing onshore from the ocean to blowing offshore from the land out to sea. The winds are known down south as the Santa Anas, and up north here is Diablo winds. And they're typically high gusting, hot winds. They can fan tiny sparks into infernos in minutes, literally. And these conditions have become ever more dangerous as we heat up. And on top of that, we're told that we're living in another great epic of extinction of species. And those thoughts were weighing on me when I was awakened one October night a couple of years ago, particularly bad years here, by the unmistakable sound of those Diablo gusts. October augury. Roused from sleep by buffeting winds, I shuffle in darkness to gaze out at Orion, locked in pursuit, ascendant now on the eve of the hunter's moon. As Diablo winds gust from parched land, scattering withered gatherings as summer's last scorching gasp, threatening fire before succumbing to winter's bludgeon. Already my dream, an old woman outside my door, sweeping dead leaves and laughing, skitters away, elusive as an autumn hare, or the wind's almost intelligible clamor. Can the hunter see the seasons shifting in unfamiliar ways? Will he quit the game? The news today proclaimed 3 billion birds vanished from the skies, sparrows, blackbirds, warblers, and more. Since I was a young man, a span laughably short, set against the migrations of Betelgeuse and Rigel. Despite stark witness, we remain steadfast in past imaginings, starry-eyed, abandoned, deaf and dumb to all discourse that might call those passerine spirits back. The street lamp casts long shadows of writhing branches on the wall, transmuted by despair into supplicants, beseeching forbearance from the fire sure to come. So Albert Einstein was not a fan of quantum physics because he couldn't reconcile with its innate randomness. He famously said, God does not play dice. However, the more we look at it, to the best of our knowledge, she does. Is God playing dice with the universe? Is everything ivories, rattling bones? Is providence random, blind, and perverse? Whether your lot is benign or adverse depends a lot upon lots of unknowns. Is God playing dice with the universe? Are we doomed to be faders, eternally cursed with dice never passed, but unceasingly thrown? Is providence random, blind, and perverse? Is fortune our fate? Which fate would be worse, that undetermined or one cast in stone? Is God playing dice with the universe? Coming to pass, does all end in a hearse, no matter which pattern of pips is sown? Is providence random, blind, and perverse? In snake eyes or boxcars, atoms disperse, but is the pointless hazard alone? Is God playing dice with the universe? Is providence random, blind, and perverse? I was a big fan of Dylan Thomas as a boy, in case you couldn't tell. One of the most intriguing questions of modern cosmology is, given the advanced age of the universe, why haven't we seen evidence of other civilizations among the stars? Lots of explanations have been proposed, possible explanations, such as perhaps advanced civilizations simply move into other more favorable universes in the multiverse. Perhaps we live in a simulation like the Matrix, like we're inside some advanced civilization's video game. Maybe we're being deliberately shunned by other advanced civilizations. That one is attractive if you watch the news at all. This question was given the name the Fermi paradox after Enrico Fermi, a great scientist of the 20th century, who, while pondering the issue, wondered aloud, where is everybody? Where everybody is. Down here somewhere on the sidewalk, feeling fuzzy, duped by window and mirror, waving Adinkra flags at parading zoomorph floats, waiting for a bus, express, not local, that isn't coming, since now isn't there. Somewhere, is there a mirror of us? Hanging on to time by fingernails, fending off road meteors while the field keeps sprouting life, eating life, no forwarding address. Extraterrestrial RSVP regrets for a premier galactic gala would leave us orbiting binary variables, rapture and terror. Living in an ice cream parlor, why step outside? Bienvenue, holographic hootenanny. Our neck of the Stone Age is redlined, maybe. Bones shake losers more than winners, and history keeps changing birthdays in the infinity that, no matter how mystics or physicists dice it, adds up to one. Regardless, the sun shines on curiosity, shipping out on blood-tide galleons to depths where fish light up like a rock and roll laser show. Alone or alone in a crowd, building redoubts of doubt. On this side of the mirror, everything is a miracle, so nothing is. In life's green room, waiting for a cosmic audition. Well, again, thank you, Shawn, and everyone for your kind attention. I'll wrap things up with some thoughts that arose out of a drive I made down to Southern California a while back. Highway 5, as you may or may not know, is very conducive to meditation. Distance. Hurtling through the night, down the interstate alone, cocooned in satellite music, singing along with the proclaimers that I would walk 500 miles, while my engine mills the distance between me and a city of angels. Motion is illusion, says Zeno's paradox, since a step contains infinity. But we shrug, grab a toothbrush and take off, driving by night to beat traffic, leaving hair splitting to philosophers, knowing from news bulletins that bullets reach their mark. In truth, it's quiescence that's chimera, warp speed reality. Far-flung galaxies, immobile, viewed through immensity's lens, ceaselessly scatter like haloed starling murmurations as the universe balloons, pulling new space out of nothing, like an elephant from a hat. So close, so remote. Do you feel the steering wheel tug toward the next nowhere exit, leading down a desolate road, ending in an open field? Will you follow your urge to stand in the dark on parched grass, arch your neck to ask the stars your place in this world, how far you have to go? Thank you.
Well, Michael, I guess the logical question is, are we there yet? This book is such an enjoyable read, such a vast array of subjects that you conquer in your narrative. And there are some, very heavy topics that kind of weave through the book, but I just love your deliciously dark sense of humor. That colloquy with death is one of my favorite poems in the whole book. And I think the humor running through really elevates the whole collection. And I think, if we can laugh at ourselves during the darkest of times, we really can find our own personal heaven while going through hell. So thank you for writing and sharing these poems with us today. It was a delight.
Very cool.
Our next featured poet is P.M. Draper. the author of After Pyre. Pat Draper is a baby boomer who retired during the pandemic. Her previous book of verse, The Towel of Hibiscus, was published in 2020. She won second place in the COVID competition for her poem, A Time Like This, which appears in After Pyre, and is actually one of my favorite poems in the book. She's been a closet poet for years, coming out in 2018 when she joined a local writers group. She lives in Vero Beach, Florida, with her husband and Boston Terrier, Oreo. Please welcome Pat Draper.
Thank you, Shawn, and thank you to all of you who are listening and viewing to this poetry reading sponsored by the Poetry Box. I'm Pat Draper. On my book, it's listed as PM Draper because there are two of us in the poetry world. And when I first published in 2020 and thought that I would use Pat Draper, I was rudely awakened to the fact that someone had beat me to it. So that's why I'm listed as PM Draper on After Pyre. The first poem I would like to read to you talks about my daughter coming home from overseas. She worked in Iraq for 4 years in the embassy. And those of you who are parents can appreciate the pins and needles that happens under those circumstances. And this one, I'm pleased to say, placed second in the COVID competition at the Laura Riding Jackson Foundation in Vero Beach, Florida, where I live. The title is A Time Like This. I never want to forget those 26 hours you last came home. The soft knock on my bedroom door at 5 in the morning, jumping on my bed, sprawled across the foot, telling stories of Baghdad and beyond as I sipped coffee. The clock stood still. Social distancing be damned. You're my sugar bear, my youngest. Even at 32, these hugs can't wait another 3 months until I see you again. I'll always take my chances with you as we climb into the rental Mustang, revving the engine, ready for a spin. This next one will hopefully draw you in. The title is More Likely Than Watching Squirrel Sex. Needless to say, as a semi-retired nurse practitioner, I gotta tell you, I had never seen the deed done between these two critters until about 5 years ago. I was looking out the window at work, looking at the parking lot, watching the squirrels go around the oak tree. And then all of a sudden they were in the middle of, doing what we all do. And before you know it, it was over with. It couldn't have been more than 3.6 seconds at best. And the writer in me said, damn, how do I incorporate that into a poem? So this is the hook that will make you read How to Succeed as a Writer. And the beginning of the title is More Likely Than Watching Squirrel Sex. How to Succeed as a Writer. Surrender first to your muse, flirt with hedgerows and highbrow urges, but go for the gusto, make unmitigated messes, confess all over the page, then lick it up with a spoon. Only you can know what it means, but the whole world deserves a taste. Embrace full frontal, unlike the squirrels. Find the vellum and the fancy quill pen. Curlicues with a touch of whimsy help you figure it out on the fly. Caress goodbyes. Charge what it's worth. In a million years, there will be 1,000 like you. So flaunt the original now. Make them pay the price. It's a steal, a doozy of a deal compared to what you paid to find those damn words in the first place. Some call it angst. Hell, it's the Super Bowl of Greek tragedies. Isn't that what makes poetry cathartic? And the reviews will say, with searing syllables, uncanny nuance, and an aching vision we haven't seen in decades, she artfully couples images never before conceived. Now let's get back to the squirrels. This next one is a tribute to Lawrence Ferlinghetti. He died last year. And as I was writing it, I was thinking of the other celebrities that we've lost, Robin Williams, Prince, things that just break your heart. But Lawrence Ferlinghetti was a tremendous icon, a pillar in the writing community. And I'm sure that all of you have a favorite verse of his. But the title is Lawrence Ferlinghetti Says Goodbye. The world is a beautiful place to be born into, a Coney Island of the mind, even with a bomb now and then, or the occasional accidental death like Prince. Back then, Minneapolis was known for his music, not its murders. Mr. Williams was deliberate. Check out man before the walker arrives with a shower chair and mechanical soft meals to prevent aspiration. No choking allowed. He freed himself from the failings of his mind. In a flash, done, gone, hanging, hung. I miss you, Robin. Gnarly nose and lopsided grin, whirling monologues you gave in a dervish spinning style, even as the clock kept ticking. Yes, this world is the best place of all for making babies and goosing statues, even if in the middle comes the smiling mortician. This next one is the signature poem, referring to the title after Pyre. And I'd like to read before that the epigram by William Carlos Williams. Our dreams have been assaulted by a memory that will not sleep. My sister died unexpectedly 19 years ago. And this is what I wrote last year for her. Pyre. Number 1. It's in 5 parts. I wish I could shimmy like my sister Kate. A ragtime tune, my childhood theme song, salute to Catherine Norma, my sister Kate. Older, she was the gorgeous one, with a dimpled cheerleader smile, a sleek brunette with flashing black-brown eyes that followed you everywhere. How she looked like Coltrane blues before she knew what she was playing. She had a laugh beyond her years, throaty, guttural. She'd give a sidelong glance that said, "Watch me, kid, it's like this." And off she'd walk, hint of a wiggle. Then Kate knew exactly what she was doing. She drove the boys crazy wild. Pregnant, she married at 16. 2. A baby at 16 changes everything. The world's axis shifts in ways a teenager can never fathom. The future is redefined. Doors shut, focus narrows. Survival is day to day. Dreams are for others. Now there's a baby. But babies grow and jobs provide. On a good day, enough. Weeks, months, and then years pass. The future is here, and Kate's survived, sober. It's time to try on one of those dreams for size. Nursing school. She's accepted and studies harder than she has for anything else before, and she's done it. She graduates valedictorian at age 38. The world is hers again until it's not. 3. It was a rite of passage, a peal of the forbidden. Boone's Farm wine in brown paper bags brought to teenage parties at the pavilion, purchased by older buddies after secret promises. Kate told me once that it tasted like candy when I asked her why she drank and drank daily. She had pet names for liquor, Jingle Bells for J&B, that sounded cutesy, now pathetic. A predilection genetic that is simply straightforward, but then heartbreaking in how it swallowed her. 12 steps gave her back her life one day at a time until the cravings surfaced again, wanting more after the dance with depression. In the company of divorce, the madness overtook her. She thought she could handle it. But there's no bargaining with the monster of addiction. Either kill or be killed. 4. A shot was fired. He had no doubt of what the sound was. The still of the cool autumn morning was interrupted by a harsh pop. He was sitting on his porch drinking coffee. It was too early for deer season. What could it be? The next morning, he heard of the neighbor lady found outside her house, next to the garage, next to the garbage cans, found burned to death. He sighed. She hadn't seemed depressed, but he had to admit he didn't really know her. She and her husband had just been together a few years. And there was a son, too, hers apparently. He didn't remember the last time he had been around. And she was burned to death? I wonder what that shot was. 5. I feel uncomfortable with the price purists pay for their beliefs. Buddhist priests haven't made American news since setting themselves on fire in Vietnam. I cannot grasp what made them do it. I cannot grasp what made you do it. I don't accept the words printed on the death certificate that read self-immolation, death by fire at one's own hand. Kate, somehow I think you'd agree. Remember how you told me about Chuck? Mom couldn't do it. We mulled over how it happened, time and time again. Car accident, explosion, fire. Our brother killed in less than a minute. We'd comment on how he died, vowing never, never, as if teenage words would protect us from future's vagaries. Sister's pledge sealed in years, extinguished in the amber of ashes. Now, after a deep breath, thank you all for staying with me. This last one hopefully will make the nanas in the audience smile. This was after a trip out to San Diego to see my son and his wife and my granddaughters. You know, there's black sand on the beaches out there, which is so cool. And the title is From My Caesura. A caesura is the blank space between stanzas in a poem. And I like to think of my own caesura is sort of the transition between phases in my life, or from working full-time to now being semi-retired. From my caesura. Pack the picture with the grandkids. Feel the breeze prickle your skin, wiggle toes in the fine black mica sand. Shiver a little as you slouch towards Bethlehem. Stand tall on every rock. Ascend Everest if you must. Apollo, Zeus, even Jesus is waiting. Show the troika what you've got. As seconds, count the minutes, and hours fillet the weeks in this year of your life, a crucible you cannot forget. Build the retirement home you've always wanted on American Express, that forever place in a perfect location, location, location. Count stars from the roof, pocketing the Milky Way in obsidian darkness. Touch the bones of every dream. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Pat. That was just delightful. And, you know, this is such a unique collection of poems you've written for After Pyre. So many different topics, so many different emotions as you read through it. I mean, you have a little nostalgia. I feel gratitude. I feel sadness. I feel shock. And then there's the wonderful humor. And it's like this roller coaster ride that you don't want to end. So thank you so much for taking us for a whirl. Our final poet tonight is David Gonzalez, author of Soundings. David Gonzalez is a storyteller, playwright, and performer whose poetry has been featured at Lincoln Center's Out of Doors Festival, Bill Moyer's documentary, Fooling with Words, NPR's All Things Considered. For 8 seasons, he was the host of the New York Kids, a high-energy live radio program on New York Public Radio, where for fun, fast-paced creativity, and social relevance for children was the mission. Later, David wrote the opera libretto for Rise for Freedom at the Cincinnati Opera and authored many other works, including The Man of the House, commissioned by the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, Muriel, an Afro-Cuban musical, and The Boy Who Could Sing Pictures. David has toured widely through the US and abroad. He is a Joseph Campbell Foundation Fellow and has extensive experience supporting communities through the arts. Soundings is his first full-length book of poetry. Please welcome David Gonzalez.
Hey, thank you. And I just want to say how grateful I am to Shawn for helping me bring this vision to life, a dream to life. And also Cindy Hockman, who's somewhere out there, who's my editor, who guided me with such clarity and intelligence and generosity. Wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. Also, a big shout out to my friend Juan Mobley, who just been a champion and a best friend in the world of poetry. And also my mom, who's out there somewhere at 90 years old. So, Mom, thank you. Some of these poems are for you. This is a mishmash. At least I thought it was a mishmash. And then my wonderful editor, Cindy, said, you know, we should shape these into sections. And I started becoming evident with her support and guidance. This book of poems has 5 sections, and I'm going to read from each of the sections. The first one is called New Yorican, and perhaps you've heard that word, perhaps you haven't. But if you're Puerto Rican and from New York, you're a New Yorican. In fact, maybe you've heard of the New Yorican Poets Cafe, a famous spot of multiculturalism and wide-ranging arts. So New Yorican is the first one, kind of identity stuff. The second one is Rings of Fire, Ice, and Jazz, and that's kind of a place where I put thoughts on music and transformation. Entanglement. Michael, I'm so happy to hear you read some of your poems about cosmology. Entanglement is a section where I've put some of the poems that are related to cosmology and other sciences. Above, Below, and Between is contemplations of, well, just that. Above, below, and in between. And back to the beginning, well, it'll be evident, I think. So I'd like to start with a poem called El Barrio, and first a couple of words. El Barrio is hood in Spanish, and El Barrio is a particular neighborhood in Manhattan. but there are barrios in every major city, and I'm sure you're aware of them. So, and then there's a couple of other words. Clave is the kind of essential rhythm of Afro-Cuban music, which through the diaspora of those Africans, that music, that groove has really infiltrated everything from rock to pop to hip hop to everything. And it's also the essential groove of salsa music. And anyway, this is kind of a bilingual poem, and I'm not going to say more about it. Here's El Barrio. Bring on the clave. Bring on the clave, Tito Puente style. Bring on the 2-3 ritmo magic. Vaya papi que tu mirada, que tu mambo moves me. Vaya mami que tu mirada mirrors my own curiosity. Vaya la clave. Vaya el sacred groove que me tiene floating y flotando and planted into the bedrock de esta tierra firme of this our earth. The winged clave, uprooted, sold out, chained to the miserable hold of a Portuguese slave ship, forced into migration, this sacred syncopation mixed with the strains of Andalusian canto in the sugarcane fields of El Caribe, and land at this spot, this town, this Nueva York, El Barrio, el fingertip grip onto the American dream, where half the streets are open wide to the horizon and the other half are dead ends. Y donde el ritmo no tiene fin, and where the groove is deep, baby. El Barrio, where milk is not milk, but leche. Where manteca is manteca, and where the plantains are maduros, they are ripe, sweet, brown smiles. El Barrio, where the WhatsApp call, la llamada tu pueblo is freaking free, and grandmother's voice is honey, and you need it to be. Listen, abuela, in Puerto Rico, Cuba, Santo Domingo, Mexico y Honduras, los muchachos speak English at a school, pero español en la casa, mamá, el lenguaje de nuestra sangre. Our blood tongue at home. And each morning I recite for them your prayer, abuela, que Dios te cubre con su santa bendición. May God surround you with his sanctified blessing. And they cross themselves and go outside to play, and cross themselves again when they pass the storefront churches where the charismatic Pentecostals are raising the roof. And once again at the corner of 176th in Amsterdam, where gladiolas and lilies and everlasting silk rose blossoms mark the spot where Papo was shot. His lifespan, June 14th, 2000, June 2nd, 2018, R.I.P. is spray painted onto the tenement bricks. And scrawled beneath the sad youthful eyes of Jesus on a plastic gold crucifix are the words, "Why do the good die young?" I'm going to move back to Puerto Rico when I retire. I'll get a house near the beach and eat mangoes all day. But hey, then my kid will probably go to college, que Dios le bendiga, in Ohio, marry a sweet, smart person from there, y entonces los nietos, the grandkids, will need me. And I'll need them to know where they come from, who we are, how we live. So I guess I'll stay here in El Barrio. Life is that way. Life is that way, moving and changing like the crackle and the burst from Tito Puente's timbal, moving and changing in El Barrio. Thank you. Thank you. So, I went to, at the Met here in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, there's a gallery of Rodin sculptures, and sometimes I really love to use artworks as prompts, and this is a short poem, and this is from the next section of the book called Rings of Fire, Ice, and Jazz. Don't ask me how this fits into that, but I don't know. Here we go. So this is a short poem called Woman of Sorrow, after Rodin's Fallen Caryatid, carrying a stone. Yeah, if I could show you a picture of this sculpture, you'd understand more perhaps. But anyway, Woman of Sorrow. Burden-born woman of sorrow, of long spine and strength, you bear the heavy stone. It is the weight of your blood path, the weight of the patriarchy and the grief necessary to make this earth of troubles into a home. Thank you. Yeah, so I've been working on a piece. It's a collaboration with an astrophysicist and a remarkable kind of post-Ornette heavy metal guitarist, phenomenal musician. And the piece is called The Effects of Gravity, and I'm writing poems to illuminate and to reflect upon cosmological history. We're telling the story of the universe. Yes, we are. Anyway, this one is called How the Making Happens. Emma, 3 years old, dips her finger into a puddle at the river's edge. She swizzles it around and around, delighting in the bubbles and eddies she has conjured. Me, I stare at my draining tub. The indifferent flatness of the bath water whirls into a vortex and disappears. I confess a guilty fascination when I click into weather.com and see the chaotic imprint of our planetary origins, in the elegant, furious spinning of tornadoes that tear through Missouri towns and the hurricanes that beat Puerto Rico to a pulp. This swirling, this drawing into solidity is how the making happens. Like the shaman at the fire stirring her conjuring pot, making the potion that creates all that is real, all that is imagined, all of it, all of us, made from one effect of gravity or another. Thank you. Just keep myself honest with the time here. Oh, I didn't set my stopwatch. Anyway, I've got a couple more. So this comes out of visiting a friend, and my friend's dad kind of invented extruded plastics. He made a ton of money early in life and devoted himself to his hobby, which was trying to fill in the gaps in Darwin's theory of evolution. He studied Jay Gould and all these people, and he had so much bread that he had his own little natural history museum at his beautiful estate out in the Hamptons. And it's a room filled with animals. Anyway, this one is called Life Code. I will surround myself with the history of life on Earth. A fossilized crab caught pulling itself from the sands, petrified dinosaur bones, the massive skull of an extinct turtle, vertebrae wide as an albatross's wingspan from a great blue whale. I will surround myself with the documents of biodiversity, to place evolution at my fingertips, to touch the branches of the animal kingdom, to allow my imagination to rummage up the tree of life, to feel the grain of the leopard's spotted fur, the smooth arc of the mammoth's tusk, the ridged curvature of the water buffalo's horn. I will surround myself with skeletons and pelts, taxidermy specimens, and pin trays displaying the fluorescence of beetles, scarabs, and formations of marching tarantulas. I will display my treasures in dust-tight cases, on pedestals, common hooks, and custom stands. The polar bear shall lie before the fire. Alone in my dead, silent study, the species will speak to me in hisses, squeals, grunts, and mellifluous bird songs, each voice claiming a part within the harsh, chaotic beauty. In the corner, suspended between a giraffe's skull and a rhino's jawbone, will be a human, stripped of flesh and blood, eye sockets vacant, shocked and speechless at their placement within the beastly catalog of creation. Thank you. I guess lastly, right, Shawn? Is that about what I have? 2 minutes? Yeah. Okay, great. And this is for my mom.
We have two
Two
more.
more poems.
Oh, 2 more poems. Okay, great. Thank you. This one is for my mom. And again, this is connected to the Effects of Gravity project. You may or may not know this, but it is true that our home galaxy, Milky Way, in 2 billion years will collide with Andromeda. And there's actually spectacular imagery that is a simulation of this. Anyway, I could share some of that later if you like. Spins the wheel. Somewhere in the cosmos, 90 years old, she sits at the dining room table as quiet as a constellation. Teaspoon by teaspoon, her memory disperses. Playing whirly-word on her iPad, in the jumble of letters she finds air, hair, chair. Spins the wheel again for a new scramble. For 5 hours a day, this is the entirety of my mother's fleeting world. She'd been in Saigon in '68, trekked the Siberian tundra, dove the Great Barrier Reef, shopped Parisian couture. Spins the wheel, ill, till, still, and for the 1000th time she tells me, La vida es un sueño. Life is a dream. She partied in Ibiza, skied the Italian Alps, rolled on ecstasy, bowed to her guru in India. Spins the wheel, ace, pace, space. No, really, life is a dream. In 2 billion years, home galaxy will collide with Andromeda. But the apparent catastrophe won't trouble what even a single blade of grass, won't dither whatever bio-cyber consciousness survives this infinite cycle of extinctions. They will approach. They will interact with spectacular gravitational dynamics. Billions of stars will draw together, 2 becoming 1. Like the way that first true lover's caress changed everything forever. Spins the wheel. Dear, madre, dream. Thank you, Mama. Love you. And what would life be without a rant? If you got to imagine like a sort of like heavy metal, kind of grungy, hard, funky thing underneath all this. Patriarchal, hierarchical power system dominates, decimates. This man-made schism, this barbarism, slices our ecological nature from our social nature. It's the system, the neurotically, compulsively expand or die system, like a psychotic Ouroboros, a hoarding, misogynistic, and paranoid system that shits where it eats, othering every other thing. The beast is out of the cage. Devour or be devoured. Endless growth, endless consumption, feckless, reckless, fuck this. Corporations peddle ecological mirages with think green, be green, do green, all the while raking in the green. And the grass grows greener, but meaner. Chromosomal aberrations rise through the food chain. Just watch a 3-legged frog hop. A message from the University of the Streets to the universal perversity of the cheats. This myopic gluttony is a choice. This systemic arrogance is willful. Imperialism is doing us. It's ruinous to all of us. Thank you.
Wow.
Wow.
Well,
David.
that
That
was phenomenal.
phenomenal.
An absolute treat to hear your
poetry.
Every single poem in this collection is a rhythmic treat for the ear. and just a wonderful story for the heart. I mean, that poem about your mother that broke my heart. I mean, that was just phenomenal. I love how you share so much of yourself, your Puerto Rican heritage, your imagination, and your whole world in these poems. And I can't thank you enough for taking time out from your very busy performing schedule, I know. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing these phenomenal poems with us today. This book is such a treat. Thank you. Let's have a giant round of applause, or should I say, plave, for all of our readers today. And thank you, our audience, for joining us for another edition of the Poetry Box Live. It means the world to us that you joined us here on Zoom to celebrate their poetry. Our next show will be on Saturday, October 8th, featuring Peter Kaufman, author of The Round Whisper of No Moon, Lori Kruber-Cherian, author of Poems of the Point, and Leanne Grable, author of the illustrated chapbook, My Husband's Eyebrows. To keep up to date on upcoming shows, new releases, and submission opportunities, please subscribe to our newsletter by going to thepoetrybox.com, where you'll find a sign-up form at the bottom of each webpage. And speaking of submission opportunities, we will be open next week on September 15th through the end of October for submissions of poetry and visual art for our 13th issue of The Poeming Pigeon. So you can go to our website and click on The Poeming Pigeon on the top menu for all of the details. Thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to sharing more poetry with you next month on the Poetry Box Live.